pleasure for me and an honor to participate to the Conney conference. So thank you to the 92 White and the Wisconsin-Madison University for organizing, and of course the Conney family. Art and Kabbalah is a very wide topic that has not actually yet been very much looked after, and needs a lot to be done. And I'm speaking about the visual aspect in Kabbalah. Not only that, the visual images that we have that are related to Kabbalah. Having said that, it's very important studies have been and working projects have been made that focus on the visual data of Kabbalah. And I'm just going to quote a few of them. Batsheva Goldman-Ida from the Tel Aviv Museum has recently published a book on Hasidism and Kabbalah and art. Yossi Reyes from the Haifa University is working for years now on the Ilaney Sefirot, the topic of my presentation today, and the epistemic aspect of Kabbalistic images. Jonathan Schorsch from Potsdam University that I met 2 weeks ago is working on a fabulous project about the images of angels in the Sefer Raziel, the book of Raziel, and very important magical books of Kabbalah. And Neama Velozny, who wrote very important research of the images of the demon in the incantation ball imagery of ancient ball magic. So now, what about me? So actually, I'm not properly a scholar into a specialist into art and Kabbalah. I'm a scholar in Jewish mysticism, medieval Jewish mysticism and philosophy, and I am an artist. So my field of research and expertise is about the relation between philosophy and Kabbalah, and I wrote intensively on the notion of Ein Sof, infinity, in the Middle Ages and its relation to other abstract concepts of philosophy. I wrote about negative theology, about divine unity, and other topics alike. However, for the past few years, I do switch my interest of research on the status of images in Kabbalah, in the theological discourse, on the question of abstraction and figuration in Kabbalah, connecting therefore again with topics that I was also dealing in my art. On the other hand, in my artistic work, as you're going to see later, in the last few years I began to deal with Kabbalistic projects, and I have a series of paintings on angels, on talisman, and another one on Ramsot, and the third one that I'm going to present today on the Ilaney Sefirot, the Sefirotical tree. So I will first present very briefly how Kabbalah addressed the controversial question of God's representation and anthropomorphism, and I will then present the Bill Gross collection of Ilaney Sefirot, on which my artistic work is based on. But first, we need to understand what is the question, and what is the question at stake. So what is articulating the problematic of representation, as everyone knows, in Judaism goes back to the second commandment, and which is based itself on two verses. So one is about the exclusivity of God's worships, and the second about the prohibition of using graven image and likeness. So this is very important to have the two, to my point of view, they combine the two extremities of the same question, and they give the complexity of the problematic altogether. So discussion about idolatry and the worship of other gods, which is the subject of the second commandment here, is actually a problem that belongs to the ancient world and is less relevant today in the inner discourse of Judaism. Our modern world since the Middle Age, and I haven't checked time, sorry, I'm touching myself. Right. So in the Middle Age, we switch from a focus to other worship of God, which is the definition of idolatry, to the problem of the representation itself. And how can we describe visually or plastically the true one God? So now, how does it happen, and what happens in the Middle Age that makes this switch? And as it is known for many of us, this is the introduction of the philosophical discourse. This is from the 9th century until this apogee of the 12th century and forwards. We see in Judaism the introduction of new way of thinking, which is philosophy. It starts with Baghdad, and then with Maimonides is really a golden age of that trend. So what does philosophy do to that question of representation and to that question into the Judaism? So what Maimonides do, he comes and set up new theological standards by making any reference to anthropomorphism as the idolatry itself. It changed and switched the component of that problematic. So we cannot more anymore use any form of anthropomorphism to describe God. And all what we know about God, or what the Bible says about God, being generous, angry, merciful, and raising his hand and the likes, is tainted by the language of man and cannot be taken at face value as a direct knowledge about what is God. This is a very strong iconoclast point of view that leads only to negative theology. But what is really bothering in the image? What is the power that an image has that may evolve into idolatry? And I want to bring here the work of René Magritte as a great example of that problematic. So, even the better the image, but also what he says about his image. And I think it's very interesting. I'm going to read it. The famous pipe, how people reproached me for it. And yet, could you stuff my pipe? No, it's just a representation, is it not? So if I had written on my picture, this is a pipe, I'd have been lying. So here, I think we see all the deepness and the layers of what an image is and how it works. This is that the image is only a simulacrum. However, as a simulacrum, it always will refer and make as if it is a real thing. And we cannot not see the image without seeing a pipe. So the illusion is working even if it is written on the image, this is not a pipe. So this is a paradox of the image, and I think its power of representation lay in that very capacity to represent something anyway, by all means. So he has an image as its own life, an image as its own power, and this is what makes it so important and so difficult and dangerous for when we speak about worshiping God or representing God. So now, so Kabbalah will definitely give recognition to the power of images, and Kabbalah will ignore the implication of the philosophical critique of Maimonides. And this is what I want to explain next, and how they do that, and what is the theological framework that they're using to be able to answer such a critiques, nevertheless. So as we all know, Kabbalah is a very symbolical images and a very use all kind of description, erotics, and everything is an image, everything is a symbol in Kabbalah, everything is such a point that scholars prefer even to refer to Kabbalah as a mythical way of thinking, because this is what Kabbalah does. It revives myths and brings into the poetic of the divine. This is the fascination that everyone has for the Zohar book, for example. So now, someone is calling me. So how does it work? How can they keep affirming the power of representation after Maimonides' critiques. So because we have to understand that Kabbalah is not indifferent to the philosophical discourse. On the contrary, Kabbalah borrows to philosophy a lot of terminology, a lot of vocabulary, and a lot of way of thinking. And we have to see the renewal of Judaism in the Middle Age as being on those two aspects of Judaism. Kabbalah on one side and philosophy, they are part of the same kind of revolution. This is the best way to understand it. So now I brought a text that I think is also very representative of how Kabbalistic thinking works in terms of image and symbols. So this is a text, a very famous text of Yosef Ticatila, active at the second part of the 13th century. And this is his masterpiece, The Gates of Light, and this is a quote from the introduction of his book. So let's read that. Now know and understand that there is between him and us no resemblance in a sense or structure, but the intention in the form of our limbs is that they are made in the image of science, impenetrable and superior subjects that the knowledge cannot know, but as memory image. This is similar to the written word Reuven ben Yaakov, for the letters and its form are not really the form of Reuven ben Yaakov. They are not its form, nor its structure, nor its essence, but a memory. The written Reuven ben Yaakov is a sign for the same essence and structure known and called Reuven ben Yaakov. So here a very semiotic text that is complex, but I'll try to just take out of that text what I want for the purpose of my paper. So first, very important to see the beginning of, it starts from negative theology. It starts from where the philosophers conclude. It starts from, of course, we don't know, we cannot. Is infathomable. Nothing can express him. This is something that recurs in all the Kabbalistic writing. They always start the discussion on semiotic language the same way. No, understand that there is between us and him no resemblance. Nevertheless, we do have other things. So this is a difference that is important to us now. But not only the difference, but also that they agree with the philosophers on that point. But they don't want to get to the same conclusion. Their way is not the negative theology, on the contrary. They become poets, artists, and mystics. So here, this is reversing the process of Maimonides. It's to say, this is not what you say. The language is not only a human language. The language is not only what we can do to describe a reality that is way above our head. The language is not as something very powerful. It works like a sign. It's a sign that brings into memory and reactive something that belongs to the supernal world. So this is how it works. The signs of the language are actually representation of a matrix. We don't know how that matrix is, but we have the sign, we have the memory, and we can activate it. So it's like the name of someone. When you call him by name, he will answer. Is there a resemblance between the name and the person? No, but it doesn't matter. What is important is the link between those two entities, that essence, that person, and its name. And this is truly a good explanation and a good way to understand how Kabbalah sees language and how Kabbalah sees images, and how they allow themselves to speak in such anthropomorphic way about God, because they think that it's representing inner structure that we don't know. So our language is not only a symbol for something that we cannot describe other ways, it's the real structure. So this is not anthropomorphism, this is a theomorphism. And this is what is beautiful about Kabbalah. Okay, I have to watch myself because too many things. So he has a form, he has a structure, he has a shape. So it's another kind of abstraction. The abstraction we're talking about is not amorphic, as in the Maimonidean ethos. The only difference is that its signification is hidden, and this is very important. We understand why Kabbalistic knowledge needs to be esoterical, because we need to decipher, we need to have the right tools to understand it. It's not something that is accessible right away. It's something that contains a secret. The secret needs to be deciphered only by the chosen one, only by the one that needs and the one that knows. So I think I said pretty much what I wanted to say. So now we move to the Ilanot Sefirot. Just a minute. So now I want to take the rest of the time that is left to present the Ilaney Sefirot, the Sefirotical trees, and my own work based on that. So what is a Sefirotical tree? It's a representation the same way that I described earlier. It's a kind of diagram. It's a kind of matrix of the divine where everything is organized and refers to it. The Kabbalist speaks about Kabbalah as Osek Berashi Prakim, dealing with chapter heads. And the diagram works the same way. It has chapter heads. It organizes knowledge into a structure. It's supposed to be synthetic and general. Yeah, you don't agree? Okay. So I'm just running the pictures behind me because I want you to have a sense, and I'm going to describe what we're seeing. So the Big Rose, this is all those wonderful images are part of the William Gross collection. William Gross is a very successful businessman that dedicates all his life to his collection of practical and magical Judaica. And he has one of the most comprehensive collection of Ilaney Sefirot. And I need to thank him for his generous access to his materials. So those Sefirotical tree goes back to the 14th century, where they started to be represented. So from the beginning of Kabbalah, we have representation in terms of graphic and diagram of what is those 10 Sefirot. Those 10 Sefirot are the 10 representation of God, right? The 10 powers of the divine. And actually it's very important to see them to understand that it's part of what's happening in the Middle Age in general, because scholars like to also call what's happening in the Christian world as a diagrammatic revolution. So suddenly people are interested to see their knowledge in forms of diagram, images, and trees. Trees is not something that the Jews invented. This is already existing in and not the trees, but the tree representation already existing in the Christian world. So this is in certain aspect, even speaking about 10 power of God is already a diagrammatic way of thinking. So we don't need only the images, but the images are here also to show us that we're going through the same process to understand the knowledge. So those trees are from the 14th century. So usually the manuscripts are only later, but they represent earlier knowledge from the 12th, 13th century. Are very simple, and they get more complex by the time. And when we get to the Lurianic Kabbalah, starting from 16th century, in the mid-7th century, we have very complex Sefirotical tree as the one you're seeing behind me. And they go from very small ones to being up to 7 meters long. So this is a fascinating topic that scholars are still searching and discussing, why they were made for, what kind of practic. It asks, how does the Kabbalist use it? Did he draw it only for himself? Of course not. So how does it work for them? So now I want to show you how much time I have. So now this is the work I've been doing based on that pool of images. Is it working? Okay. So let's stop here maybe on the next one. So here. This is my first Ilaney. So you saw the previous picture, so it's very one-to-one interpretation of what you saw. And then you see that other of my trees are much more spontaneous and independent. But the main idea in my work was to actually be not to create a new angels or a new Hamsa or a new Ilaney, but to draw upon a pool of images that are existing. So to connect first to existing iconography, like this is my memory, this is my sign, and from there to go to my own creation. So this one, for example, I don't know how to stop in. So this one is the more feminist aspect of the. This is a project I have. Okay, I can't stop it. So there is different aspect to that project. Those two first Sefirot tree or so are dedicated to understand how the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect can be pulled out, because actually the representation, the visual representation we have is mostly masculine. It's about the beard, it's about the payas, it's about all the different parts in between the ears and the nose. And I decided to create new Sefirot tree on base of texts and reinterpreted them in terms of gender studies. But actually, only the two first and the three first trees were in that direction. Those are different works. So I'm giving you the images. So here, for example, I could stop it before and I can't anymore. Right? So this is in that tree you saw in the details afterwards. It's about the faces. I'm very fascinated about the faces that they're drawing into those Sefirot trees, and it's more connected to a project my other project on the angels, and how a face can be human and not human, maybe a little bit animal. What is totemic about that kind of representation? And those were my rules of research when I painted. And so if you put two eyes very far away, so when does it stop to be a face? So how far the nose needs to be from the eyes? How synthetic can it be? Can it be more figurative? What kind of abstraction I'm dealing with? And that was very, very exciting for me. And those were what happens to me during that work. So as you see, this work, for example, is much more independent from the iconographic base that I show you, but it's related, definitely related. So here you see the word, the word kissé being kissa kavod, of course, the throne of the glory, which belongs to the ancient mystical world. This is an exhibition that is supposed to start yesterday, but will start only tomorrow when I go back home at Becky, and it's called Circle in the Tree. So playing about that idea of what is geometrical, what is diagramical, what is epistemic about that kind of organization. And those are the painting that I'm going to be exhibit there, and you are all invited next Thursday to the opening. So I think we're almost done, and then we can open the floor to question.